many of you have seen the Apple TV show Severance? Raise your hand. Oh, a few of you, yeah. So if for the rest of you, it's about some people who have chosen to undergo, it's hard to explain, they've chosen to undergo a procedure that splits their identity into a work person, where they don't have any distractions of their home life, and into the home person, their regular life without any distractions of their work. And it's sort of a chip that they place in the brain that switches identity the moment they take the elevator up to their severed floor in this company, and then it switches back when they, at the end of the day, when they reach the bottom floor. And truly. And you wonder, well, why would they undergo something like this? And you kind of find out that they're all trying to escape some pain in their lives. So it's like 40 hours a week. They don't have to think about the trauma or experience the pain in their lives. And at the beginning of the series, the work person is kind of bland. They're sort of a cipher. It's just they go to work. And then later on, they begin to develop relationships with each other, and they develop likes and dislikes. They develop desires that their home person would never think about. And here's the thing, the two identities don't know anything about the other. They're completely separate, right? And so, so spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the last episode, put your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 la. Andres is running out of the room. He's like, I didn't want to see it. I'm not going to give all of it away, but they find a very clever way to allow Mark, who's the main character, to have a conversation between both identities. And you begin to realize these are completely different people occupying the same body. Completely different, right? And then you're kind of left wondering, well, who is the real Mark? Okay, you can go to uncover your ears now. Which brings up an important question, right? Who are we really? How much of us is shaped by our environment? And for those of us on a spiritual path, it's a question we want to ask ourselves, right? Continually. Most people when asked, tell me about yourself, they say, they talk about where they're from, or their occupation, or their age group, or their religion, or their political affiliation, or their gender identity, or some sort of special interest groups, right? So we are none of those things, right? We have assumed an identity. We've been mistaken about who we are and assumed an identity that's not really us. And so Robert Brumet talks about in his book, Birthing a Greater Reality, which is our inspiration for this talk series. He talks about how we have all created a separated sense of self that most people call the ego, but that's not really accurate. So he calls it the false self. And this false self, he says, is really a pattern of repeated thoughts and feelings and behaviors that we have mistaken for us. And it is obscuring our true essence. And that's painful. And so he talks about, here he says, the cause of all human suffering lies in the mistaken belief that our separated personal self is our true self and that it is real. So how and why did we create this false self? For most of us, it was kind of created in our childhood, right? Because our parents identified with that false ego personality. Not for most of us, not everybody, but for most of us, our parents didn't really have an awareness of their divine essence. So it's learned behavior. And then it gets reinforced through, our lifetimes, through society. And our false self sort of learns how to kind of protect us against anything that might feel vulnerable and causes any pain, right? So it helps us navigate our way through an upside down world. I mean, you think about it, and you think it might be a little difficult to walk around all day long being your true divine essence, right? I am love. I am light. You are love. You are light. Which is true, right? And a beautiful thing. But we may need that sort of ego personality to kind of help us get stuff done. and to fit in, right? But the problem is it has taken over our whole identity, and rather than being of service to our divine self, which is where it belongs, of service to our higher divine self, that's where it belongs, right? And we get further and further disconnected from our essential nature. So, this false self is, in a sense, hijacked our true identity, right? It has hijacked our true identity, which leads us to feeling a sense of emptiness. I mean, it's painful not being who you truly are, right? And so this false self learns to fill up this sense of emptiness. And this is where addictions and obsessions and unhealthy attachments kind of come from, right? So part of conscious evolution, which is the journey that we are all on here, is putting this false self, or could call it the separated ego personality, putting it in its proper place and remembering who we truly are, right? Remembering who we truly are, being this true self. So, who are we, truly? Who are we? So the author gives an analogy in the book about, it's kind of like shining a flashlight in a dark room, in a very dark room. So let's say it's your bedroom, and it's pitch black dark, but you've got a flashlight. So everything the light touches, you can identify. The bed, there's maybe your side table, there's maybe the lamp on your side table, there's maybe the window, maybe over here you have a little settee, in your bedroom, if you do. Maybe there's a pile of dirty clothes on the floor. Eventually the light will see everything. You will see everything. But what you'll never see is the source of the light. Let me put that down. Because we are the light that touches everything. We are the light that is touching everything. So I love that there's a little infant here, because I am remembering when my girls I had twins, were babies, and really young infants, kind of before they could really clearly see, before their eyes really focused on something, just really little. And I remember holding them, and they would look kind of above my head. And I'm thinking, oh, are you seeing my aura? You looking at my aura? Or maybe it's an ancestor, you know? And both of our their grandmothers had passed away before they were born. So I like to think maybe, it was a grandparent or something. It was such a precious time. And it's short, it doesn't last, because then their eyes begin to focus on your face, which is wonderful, right? But I remember thinking, oh, you have let go of the infinite, realm of spirit. You have let go of that now. And so that is our process of incarnating into this human form, is we have to separate from that invisible, universal realm of divine essence, and we learn to be human. But the problem is where we're getting the information about who we are as human, comes from other people who are not connected with their divine self, right? And so we kind of learn early on things about us that may not reflect the absolute truth of us, and it starts really early. Oh, you're a big boy, and big boys don't cry, right? Oh, she probably won't be very good at math. Good thing she's cute. Oh, he's going to be athletic. Oh, you're prone to a lot of temper tantrums, aren't you? Is that going to be problematic? So we absorb this information really early on, right? And it begins to define us. We also learn early on what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. And what is not acceptable, we repress, right? Because our first instinct is to be loved and accepted. That's from our primary caregivers. We have to be loved and accepted. And so we repress it, and this is the beginning of this dynamic of developing a shadow self, which is what he's talking about in this chapter. It's a shadow self because those parts of us don't go away. They just get rejected and repressed. And they are literally living in the shadow, that shadow of fear and shame, right? But they show up later, usually in unhealthy ways, right? If we haven't done some healing around it. Or sometimes those parts of us are so abhorrent to us that we can't even acknowledge it's part of us. And so we'll project it onto someone else. Here's a clue that you may be projecting part of yourself that you haven't yet acknowledged onto someone else, is if you have an oversized reaction to some behavior that you really, don't approve of, right? Coming from somebody you don't approve of. If you have an oversized reaction to it, it could be an indication that, you're projecting your own shadow self onto the other person. So how to address the shadow self and heal it, he talks about in the next chapter, in chapter 4 in the book. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit next week, but I have something else in mind. So really you want to kind of read that chapter in the book. And here's the thing. I think it's interesting that a lot of spiritual leaders, it's become a popular topic. A lot of spiritual leaders are talking about this and writing about it. Brumet writes about it. Our friend Derek Rydell writes about it. I even devoted a chapter of it in my book. And it's that evolution of thought that is part of the New Thought movement. And I feel really good to be kind of part of a movement that says, it's a natural process and a healthy process to evolve thinking, to evolve thought from where it first started, right? That's part of a healthy spiritual path, the New Thought pioneers never talked about this, at least as far as I don't know that the Fillmores ever addressed this. It's not just something that people were addressing back then. So we have grown and evolved consciously. That's what this whole thing is about, conscious evolution. So how wonderful it is to acknowledge that, yeah, we're not stuck in this, this is the way the founders, saw it. We are growing and evolving. So conscious evolution is also about our relationship with God, understanding God and our relationship with God, Spirit, universal source, whatever we want to call it. So when asked somebody on a spiritual path, who are you? They may say, I'm a child of God, which is closer than identifying yourself with your occupation. But as we spiritually mature, we may grow into an understanding that I am more than a child of God. I am a co-creator with the universe. That divine essence, I am that divine essence knowing itself more fully as me. I am that divine essence knowing itself more fully as me. Let's say that together. I am that divine essence knowing itself more fully as me. Yeah. We talked about last week this process of involution, how the absolute or divine essence loses itself in human form and is awakening and evolving through different dimensions of our being to be fully realized. We talked about that last week and in our book study group. So some people have been very fortunate to have had a glimpse, to catch a glimpse of their true, authentic, divine identity, to know it so clearly, to know their oneness in a kind of mystical moment or cosmic consciousness experience. And he shares an experience of Jean Houston when she was a child in the book. And so this is her experience. She says, I was no longer just Jean Houston, age 6. I had awakened to a consciousness that spanned centuries and was on intimate terms with the universe. Everything mattered. Nothing was alien or irrelevant or distant. The furthest star was right next door, and the deepest mystery was mystically seen. It seemed as if I knew everything and that I was everything. How amazing to have had an experience like this just to begin with, but to have it when you're that young? Wow. It's no wonder she went into the profession she did, right? Which was the human potential movement. And in fact, a lot of people who have been fortunate enough to have some sort of mystical experience like this do go into a healing profession or ministry or something like that. So I have shared with many of you before my kind of mystical experience that I had when I was 15. So I won't go over it here. But what I want to do is for you, I want to hear from you. I want you to think about an experience that you may have had either as a child or an adolescent or adult, something where you suddenly knew who you truly were. Now, it doesn't have to be, the heavens opening and the angels, a choir of angels singing. I mean, cool, if that's true. But it doesn't have to be that. It could just be you walking down the street. And suddenly, you felt so one with the trees and the blossoms and other people. coming up here and playing your guitar and just so getting in the flow that you feel one with everything, right? I think musicians very often have experiences like this, artists. But I know all of you have had something, and I want to hear it. So next week, I want you to think about it this week to really sort of, you may not think of, it may not occur to you right now, but through the week, you may think, oh, you know what, there was that moment. Because it's so brief that sometimes we forget. Think about it, and next week I want to invite anyone who wants to share to come up and share their experience. Because when we do this in a sacred energy like this, with our collective agreement of this growing consciousness, we're really creating possibilities. Right? We're creating the possibility for this to happen for all of us. All right? So many people, just kind of give me a little tiny hand up. Do you think maybe you have had an experience like this that you'd like to share? Okay, I see a lot of hands going up. Yeah, wonderful. All right, let's do it, huh? Namaste. Hi, it's Reverend Victoria here. I'm at Unity Center of Peace with our house band, Bright Matter.
Hello.
Yeah, and if this video has inspired you or empowered you or opened your heart, opened your consciousness, or even just given you hope, we ask that you support what we're doing here by making a donation today, going to unitychapelhill.org or clicking the link below. And we thank you.
Thank
Thank you.